The rain was relentless that night, drumming on the suburban streets like it was trying to wash away every secret. The kind of storm that makes streetlights flicker and shadows grow long. Somewhere in a quiet neighborhood, a phone rang. Not just any phone. It was a child's trembling hands holding it, tiny fingers sliding over the numbers as panic clawed at her chest. 7 years old, a little girl named Aria, sitting on the floor of her living room. Blood smeared her hands, streaked across her mother's limp body. She didn't know what had happened, only that her mother wouldn't wake up. Her voice, barely audible through tears, reached out to the world. So much blood. "Mama won't wake up." The call connected to a man who had never expected to hear a voice like that. Ethan Cole, the local sheriff. Late 30s, calm, steady. Known for his quick thinking in emergencies, answered the phone. His kitchen was quiet, his night uneventful, until her words broke through. Her fear was palpable. Every syllable pierced through his heart. He didn't pause. He grabbed his brown-collared jacket, badge glinting faintly under the light, and ran to his patrol car. Rain hammered the windshield as he drove through the winding streets. Every corner, every shadow seemed dangerous, but he pushed on, guided only by her voice and the urgency in it. By the time he reached her street, the chaos was visible from the road. A woman in a bright red suit stood on the front lawn, her fair skin glowing in the intermittent streetlight. Light reddish blonde hair pulled back tightly. She was pointing aggressively at someone, her right index finger stabbing the air, like she could pierce the tension itself, while clutching a stack of papers in her left hand. Behind her, a uniformed officer held a baton in front of him, standing rigid, every muscle tense. 2 more officers on the left side of the lawn had their hands on their heads, surrendering or perhaps frozen in frustration. A tan pickup truck partially obscured one, while a white police SUV was parked to the right, its blue markings reflecting the flashing lights from elsewhere. Ethan parked, slamming the car door against the rain, water running down his collar. The sight before him didn't confuse him. It focused him. The girl on the phone, somewhere inside that house, was depending on him. Every instinct, every training, every second of experience pushed him forward. He approached the woman in red. Her voice cut through the storm. Words he couldn't fully catch, sharp and demanding, but he ignored them. His focus was the house, the 2-story home with light tan siding below, pale blue above, white trim around the windows, and a bright red door. Fall foliage surrounded it. Yellow and green leaves twisted in the wind. Something inside him recognized that house, not personally, but as a place that needed saving. He stepped onto the lawn. Rain soaked through his jacket, but he hardly noticed. He shouted her name, calling for Aria, praying that the connection hadn't dropped. And then he heard a small, shaky voice behind the open door. Aria. She was holding her mother, clinging, crying softly now that she knew someone had arrived. The panic in her voice hadn't left, but it had turned into a whisper of hope. Ethan moved closer, kneeling beside the girl, assessing the mother's condition without pause. Blood loss was severe, but she was alive. Barely, but alive. The woman in the red suit took a step back, her aggressive posture softening as she realized the sheriff had everything under control. The uniformed officer relaxed slightly, lowering his baton. Ethan's mind raced. Emergency protocols, medical assistance, securing the house, questioning witnesses, all while keeping Aria calm. He whispered reassurances into the stormy night, though he didn't even know if she could understand him fully. Every second mattered. Every second could mean the difference between life and death. He grabbed his radio, calling for backup, telling them the scene. 1 adult female. Critical condition, 1 child. Highly traumatized. Send medics immediately. The rain poured harder, visibility dropping, but Ethan's focus was unwavering. His eyes scanned the yard, the pickup, the SUV, the officers, the woman in red, and then, finally, the front door leading to the room where a child had called a stranger, a sheriff, for help, and inadvertently changed everything. Aria's voice trembled again, weak but holding on, reaching out to him. "Please, don't let anything happen." Ethan's jaw tightened. This was more than a call. This was a moment of destiny, of life and death, where his decisions now would echo forever. He leaned closer to Aria, his voice calm but firm. "Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. Help is on the way." The storm continued, rain hitting the ground like a drum, the leaves shaking in wild motion, and every second stretched into eternity. He could feel the weight of every choice, every failure, every life he hadn't been able to save before pressing against him. But this time he would not fail, because sometimes a single phone call in the middle of the night, a trembling little voice, and the courage of a child could awaken more than just a sheriff. It could awaken a town, a heart, and the realization that heroes are made in the moments nobody sees. Sirens cut through the storm, flashing red and blue across the wet lawn. Medical personnel moved swiftly, guided by Ethan's precise commands. Arya stayed close, her small hand in his, holding on with trust that only a child can give when desperation meets hope. And as the medics worked on her mother, stabilizing her, Ethan looked back at the woman in red, at the officers, at the chaos he had walked into. He realized something profound. Life could shatter in an instant. But courage, true courage, could arrive just as suddenly. He squeezed Arya's hand one last time before letting the medics lead her mother away. He promised silently, "You're safe now. This storm will end, I swear it." And in that rain-soaked suburban night, with flashing lights, shouting officers, and a child's trembling voice still lingering in his mind, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The hospital was quiet but not peaceful. Bright white lights reflected off sterile floors, and the faint hum of machines underscored every thought Ethan had. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the streets glistening with rainwater, but inside, the storm of fear, confusion, and unanswered questions raged. Arya sat beside him in a plastic chair, her small body trembling, fingers still clutched around his hand. Her mother, unconscious, lay in the hospital bed across the room, machines beeping steadily but softly. Every sound, the whir of ventilators, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, even the soft drip of IV fluid seemed louder in the quiet of the night. Ethan kept glancing at the papers the woman in red had been holding on the lawn. He hadn't asked her yet. Not now, not when the child needed him. Those papers had seemed ordinary at first. Legal documents, insurance claims, maybe property records, but something about them felt important. Something about the way she had pointed, her anger mixed with fear, told him there was more at stake than he had seen. He looked down at Arya. Her wide eyes, rimmed with tears, seemed to hold questions he couldn't answer. And yet, in her fear, there was trust. She believed he could protect her. That trust gave him a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time moved strangely when lives hung in the balance. Then the nurse returned. "She's stable for now," she said softly. "We'll continue monitoring, but she's alive." That's what matters. Ethan exhaled, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. But it didn't last. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random. That call, the storm, the woman in red pointing at him like he was somehow responsible, all of it felt connected to something bigger, something hidden. He asked Arya softly, "Do you remember what happened before you called me?" She shook her head, lips quivering. I don't know. I heard a loud noise. Then Mama, she... Her voice broke. Ethan squeezed her hand. "It's okay, I know. You were brave. That's what matters right now." Even as he spoke, his mind raced. The papers. The pickup truck on the lawn. The white police SUV. The two officers with their hands on their heads. The rigid officer holding the baton behind the woman in red. The entire scene, it didn't make sense. Something was hidden beneath the surface. He remembered the woman's glare on the lawn. Anger, fear, urgency. She hadn't been pointing at him in hate. Not really. She had been warning him, or maybe begging him to understand. He decided he needed answers. But first, safety. He called a friend in the force, someone he trusted, someone who could check on Ryan Gage, the man who had been spotted near the neighborhood before the attack. A name had been whispered in passing by one of the officers on the scene. Ryan Gage, a former employee dismissed months ago, known for grudges and dangerous skills. While they checked that lead, Ethan stayed with Arya. He told her stories, not about police work or danger, but about stars, about oceans, about simple things she could imagine while hiding from the storm in her memory. And slowly she began to relax, her trembling easing, her small shoulders loosening under his steady hand. Hours later, the detective arrived. He was tall, with a calm presence that came from years of seeing people at their worst. He approached Ethan quietly, nodding respectfully before speaking. "Sheriff Cole, I need to know everything you saw on the lawn. Every detail, even the small ones." Ethan recounted it. The woman in red, the officers, the trucks, the pointing, the surrendering gestures. Every detail mattered. The detective listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a worn notebook. When Ethan finished, the man paused, looking troubled. "This," he said finally, "is more complicated than we thought." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his pulse tightening. The detective handed him a small folder. Inside were photos from the scene, but something caught Ethan's eye immediately. One photo showed the woman in red with someone familiar in the background, someone he recognized instantly. It was Naomi Baker, the same Naomi he had known years ago, long before he had been sheriff. She had been a partner, a friend, someone who had vanished mysteriously. And in the same photo, a man lingered behind her, Ryan Gage. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't a random attack. This wasn't a coincidence. It had been planned. And now, years later, the consequences were finally unfolding in front of him. He looked back at Arya, asleep against his arm. The little girl didn't know the history, the connections, the dangerous web that had just pulled her into the center of it. And for the first time, he realized something terrifying. The storm hadn't ended. It had only just begun. The detective spoke again. "Ryan's unstable, dangerous. He may try to strike again." Ethan nodded. "Then we protect her. No one leaves this room until we know she's safe." Days passed in a blur. Arya stayed close, refusing to leave his side while Naomi remained unconscious. The hospital staff whispered about the sheriff's dedication, noting that he had never shown such care for anyone outside his immediate duty. But Ethan didn't care about appearances. All that mattered was the little girl and the woman who had survived the storm, for now. And then one evening, Ethan opened the folder again, staring at the old photos. Something new caught his eye. In the background, faint but unmistakable, was Ryan, watching, waiting, smirking even in the old photograph. Ethan leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. He understood now. This wasn't just an attack. It was message, a warning, and Ryan Gage had only just begun. Arya stirred, opening her eyes. She looked up at him, her small voice trembling. "Will he come back?" Ethan pulled her close, whispering with quiet determination. "No, not if I can help it." "Not ever." But deep down, he knew the truth. Protecting her meant uncovering every secret, confronting every danger, and facing a past that had been buried for far too long. And for the first time, he realized the storm had been sent to him, not to test him, but to awaken him, to force him to act. The night was eerily quiet outside the hospital. Rain had washed the streets clean, leaving a mist that hovered over the town like a soft veil. But inside, Ethan Cole's mind was anything but quiet. He stared at the folder again, photos of the woman in red, Naomi Baker, and Ryan Gage spread across the small table beside Arya. Every image told a story, one of betrayal, revenge, and secrets buried too long. Ethan had spent days tracing Ryan's steps. Every call, every lead, every witness pointed to one conclusion. Ryan hadn't just acted out of rage. He had been waiting for this moment, meticulously planning a strike that went deeper than a single attack. And now, the little girl's life, Arya's life, was entwined in a story, far bigger than her years could ever understand. He looked at Arya, sleeping peacefully beside him. The storm outside replaced by a calm stillness. Her tiny hand was curled around his finger, trusting him completely. He whispered almost to himself, "You'll never be alone." "Not ever." But the calm was an illusion. A faint noise outside the room made him tense. Someone was moving in the hall. His hand reached instinctively for his phone, for any means to alert the hospital staff. Then the door creaked. Not forced, not violent, but deliberate. And there, in the dim light of the hallway, stood the woman in red, her blazer soaked from the night's rain, papers clutched tightly, eyes wide and filled with urgency. She didn't speak at first, only gestured for him to follow. Ethan followed her, heart pounding. She led him to a small storage room in the back of the hospital, away from the nurse's station and cameras. And there, hidden beneath a pile of old medical files, was something that made Ethan stop cold. A small, locked box. Inside, documents connecting Ryan Gage to years of corporate theft, fraudulent activities, and, most importantly, the reason Naomi had disappeared years ago. Ethan's chest tightened. Everything was coming together. The woman in red, her name was Allison, had been trying to protect the town, the hospital, and, unknowingly, Aria. Ryan hadn't just attacked randomly. He had been eliminating witnesses, covering his tracks, and using fear to manipulate those around him. Meanwhile, back in the front yard of the suburban house, now quiet after the chaos, a Ford pickup and a white police SUV still stood. Officers, though exhausted, kept watch, ready for any sign of danger. The store of the night hadn't ended. It had simply shifted. Ethan realized he had to act fast. He couldn't just wait for Ryan to make his next move. Using the documents Allison had found, he called in federal support, backup that would finally corner Ryan without risking Aria or Naomi further. Hours later, Ryan Gage was arrested. He had tried to hide, to manipulate, to control, but the combined efforts of Ethan, Allison, and the authorities ensured that he had nowhere to run. The smirk that had haunted Ethan's thoughts was gone, replaced by the cold, silent realization of his defeat. Ethan returned to the hospital. Naomi had begun to stir, slowly opening her eyes. Her gaze met Ethan's, and in a weak whisper she said, "Thank you for keeping her safe." Ethan smiled, relief flooding through him. "She's safe. You're safe. That's what matters." Days passed. Naomi recovered, Aria laughed again, and the town slowly returned to its rhythm. But Ethan knew that night had changed him. It had reminded him of what truly mattered. Courage, trust, and the lengths one would go to protect the innocent. Standing outside the suburban home, looking at the red door, the bright green lawn, and the lingering autumn leaves, Ethan realized something else. The world could be unpredictable, terrifying even, but in the right hands, ones guided by courage and care, even the most chaotic storms could lead to safety, hope, and new beginnings. And as Aria ran toward him, her laughter pure and unbroken, Ethan knew this was more than just a victory over danger. It was a reminder that life, even in its darkest moments, could shine with light, with trust, and with love. If this story moved you, share it, comment, heart, and remind someone that even the darkest storms can be survived with courage and love. Sometimes the smallest voice can save a life and change the world. Weeks had passed since the stormy night. The suburban streets had returned to their usual calm, the leaves of autumn slowly giving way to winter frost. Yet inside Ethan Cole, the sheriff, the events of that night had left a lingering weight. Aria laughed more now, her small feet pattering across the floor as she played in the hospital room while Naomi recovered steadily. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces missing, hidden corners of the puzzle that hadn't been revealed. He revisited the documents Allison had found, scanning each page with the care of a man who had learned the hard way that one overlooked. Detail could be deadly. Most of the evidence had pointed to Ryan Gage, but among the files were encrypted letters, barely legible with coded messages. Names, dates, locations, an unseen network of people who had helped Ryan cover his tracks over the years. Ethan felt a chill. This wasn't over. Not really. He called Allison and Naomi into the small office. The two women leaned over the desk, concern and curiosity blending on their faces. "Look at this," Ethan said, point, noting to a section of the encrypted notes. Ryan had help, others, people who are still out there. And this could lead us to them. Naomi's hands trembled slightly. "You mean he wasn't working alone?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, and I'm not sure we know who to trust yet." Meanwhile, Aria, sitting nearby, tilted her head. "Will they come back?" she asked softly. Her voice, though small, carried the fear of someone who had seen too much already. Ethan knelt beside her, keeping his tone calm and steady. "We're going to make sure they can't, and until then, we stay safe together." Days of investigation followed. Ethan coordinated with federal authorities, tracing leads, verifying documents, and uncovering a trail of corruption, greed, and hidden alliances that Ryan had relied on. Each step revealed more danger, more secrets hidden under the quiet suburban facade that the town had long trusted. One evening, as the winter wind howled outside, Ethan and Allison were walking through the town square discussing the next steps. The streets were almost empty, but a feeling of being watched pressed against them like invisible hands. A shadow moved in the corner of Ethan's vision. Too fast to clearly see, but enough to make his instincts flare. "We're not alone," Ethan murmured. Allison's eyes widened. "Do you think it's him?" Ethan shook his head. "Not Ryan, someone else?" "Someone waiting to see if we'd relax." Back at the hospital, Arya and Naomi sat together. The warmth of a safe room contrasting the tension outside. Arya's small fingers traced the edge of a blanket, and Naomi watched her, whispering, "You're brave. Little one, braver than most adults I know." That night, Ethan returned to his office alone, poring over the papers again. A single realization hit him, the storm that had started it all, the wrong call. The frantic voice, the blood-soaked night, wasn't just a random act of chance. It had been the catalyst. It had forced him, the sheriff, into action. It had revealed the hidden truths, the threats, and the courage within a little girl that even she didn't know she possessed. And yet, deep down, Ethan knew the story wasn't finished. There were still shadows lingering in the corners, secrets waiting to be uncovered, and perhaps another storm on the horizon. He looked at Arya sleeping in the next room. The night quiet now, safe, for the moment. And he whispered a promise. "You're not alone." "Not now, not ever. I'll protect you, and together we'll uncover the rest." Outside, the wind howled, shaking the bare trees, but inside, a sense of calm settled, briefly. Because heroes, Ethan realized, are never truly done. They simply wait for the next call, the next chance, the next moment when courage is needed most. If this story gripped your heart, comment brave and share it with someone who believes in courage, trust, and the power of a small voice to change everything. And remember, sometimes the story isn't over. Then, when the storm has passed,